just stated it wrong. The battle is not ours. The battle belongs to God. And David recognized this when he went up against Goliath. And in that battle, he says, and that all of this assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword, nor by spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give it into your hands. How often do we try to take over the things that God is doing for us, and we try to take it over and put it in our own hands and manipulate it and make it ours, when he's willing to do the struggle? It says that the Lord is our warrior, and the Lord is his name, as he told, or as David told Goliath. Something else we need to understand. People are not the enemy. We talked about this in class earlier. People are not your enemy. Now, there may be people that rub you the wrong way. There may be people that make you mad. There may be people that you don't want to be around because of the vulgar nature of their lives, of their choices, and the things that they choose to do. But the people are not your enemy. Paul was equally clear when he says that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Even when people frustrate you to no end, they're still not my enemy. Even when we struggle to get things done and we feel like people in the world, people in our churches hold us back, they are not the enemy. What we have to realize is the very basic fact is that when we remember the truth, we will love, shepherd, and pray for the people that cause us difficulty. My mother used to tell me that when I was a kid. And it didn't always set well, because I wanted to do something physical. I wanted retaliation. I wanted them to experience the physical pain as much as the emotional pain that they caused me. But see, what I didn't grasp as a child is this very basic concept. They are not my enemy. My enemy is Satan. And as a result of that, we need to let the Lord fight the battle. And we can fight that battle through our prayer, through our supplication unto God. Reading his words of wisdom helps us deal with those things that work contrary to what we are hoping to establish in our lives. But the people are not the enemy. And leaders, our elders, our deacons, I really think it's important for us to understand that it is these folks that are the primary targets of the real enemy. If these individuals can succumb to the weaknesses, if these individuals can succumb to the things that Satan is trying to do in this world, then what we need to understand is that the enemy knows that when leaders fall, followers are wounded in the process. And I don't think I need to spend a great deal of time talking about church leaders that were prominent leaders and that they fell. because we have to also understand that our leaders are human. And they are in need of God's love and God's forgiveness and God's support. But because they stand up and say, I will accept the responsibility of leading this flock, they immediately become a target. That's why in World War II, you rarely see captains and generals and lieutenants, the leaders, with their insignia on front of their helmet, because they immediately became the target of the enemy. And so instead it was placed on the back of the helmet so that as they led the charge, the troops would follow. We need to give honor and respect to those men who serve and the families that support them in that service, because they are a walking target. And another thing the enemy likes to strike at is our marriages. And I just almost shudder as I talk about this one, is how difficult marriages are, and how surprised people are when they realize that couples can be married happily for 50 years. John Asa's parents were married 70, help me here, John, 74 years before death separated them. I never heard a cross word. But in our world today, that's not what you see. In our world today, you don't see that on TV. You see wives taking cheap shots at husbands, husbands saying unkind things about their wives. And Satan sought to divide Adam and Eve in the very beginning. And what he did was he set a pattern that has followed from time immemorial. That when God created his helpmeet, he was tickled plumb to death. But when he got caught with the forbidden fruit in his hand or on his breath, I don't know, I wasn't there. But immediately, Adam said, now this woman that you gave me, she deceived me. I'm not at fault. So instead of standing together as they should have and bonded, immediately that action drove a wedge between them where he blamed her for the fall of mankind. Well, I'm here to tell you they're both at fault. But yet it still works. If you can divide a family on any point, but especially on the points of sanctity of marriage and of the importance of respecting each other. Somebody once said, John Ace and I celebrated our 50th, as you well know. We didn't make a big deal out of it at the time, but I stand amazed. 50 years she put up with me. That woman has the patience that is beyond measure. But somebody would say, well, what is your secret to success? And I may have shared this with you, but I'm going to tell you again. We both don't go crazy at the same time. There's days that she is, whether she doesn't feel good, she has pressures that I'm not aware of or don't affect me like they affect her, and she's ricocheting off the walls. I don't start ricocheting off the walls. I become her support. What do you need? What's going on? What can I help you? Do you know what I often get as an answer? And I think a lot of guys out here have gotten that same answer. I don't know. But it's something that is felt and it's important. Now the next day, I may be the one ricocheting off the walls, and she's there to be my support. That is the secret to a successful marriage, Because if you love each other as the Lord loved you, and in fact you see in Ephesians, and we use it in ceremonies all of the time, where it says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. That's where the basis of that is. That's what makes it work. And in fact, in that same section where it says, wives, be in submission to your husbands, I know that doesn't fare well in our society today, but I want you to back up one verse. And the verse just above that, it says, respect one, or be subject to one another. And we lose that point. We lose the vision, we lose the focus, and then we become ripe targets for the things that can destroy us. Another thing that we can see, that leaders, I'm kind of jumping back now, leaders often have to fight their battles alone, among themselves. We need to pray for those guys that have willingly put themselves in that position for the benefit of the body of the church, for the benefit of us. And it's important that leaders, as they stand alone, too often they don't always have a close team that they can talk to and say what their feelings are, what their thoughts are. And we need to pray for them as they go through their struggles. Remember, even though the insignia of their responsibility may be on the back of their helmet, they are on the firing line because they have a responsibility to the Lord and to his church and to us. Many times over the responsibility that we may have or that we may feel. A nonstop sense of warfare that leaders often find themselves in is not by God's design. But yet, Paul says in 2 Corinthians, and in that passage he says, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelation, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, and give me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from exalting myself. Concerning this, I implored the Lord 3 times that it might leave me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. He says, so that the power of Christ, he talks about my grace is sufficient for you, is perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am well content with weakness, which results with distress, with persecution, with difficulties for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, I am strong, because God's grace is there and it is sufficient. I want us to understand this is a point that is critical. I've talked about congregations. And in the very beginning, I told you that the battle is not yours to fight, it is God's. But we are his agents. We are his children. We are the beneficiaries of his love. And the evil that is in this world attacks some of the most important institutions that we know of. And one of them is his church, his body. The other is marriage, the sanctity that holds families together through very difficult times sometimes and joyous times sometimes.